Sam, you?
Yes, ready to go.
Brian, can you read us out our closed session?
Yes. I move that this council certify by a recorded vote that to the best of each council member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session.
Second.
Second, can we vote, please? Okay, the motion passes 5-0. We're now in the regular business meeting. We'll begin with a moment of silence. Okay. Thank you. Are there any announcements?
I've got one.
Okay.
I'll go. The Treasurer's Office would like to remind taxpayers that the 2024 second half deadline for real estate and personal property taxes is this Thursday, December 5th. Taxes can be paid in person, by mail, over the phone, or on the city's website. Taxpayers can pay online using e-check free of charge by visiting charlottesville.gov. Please contact the City Treasurer's Office prior to the deadline if you have not received your tax bill.
Have an announcement as well. This is a note to register for the Move Safely Blue Ridge Virtual Community Open House on December the 11th. Move Safely Blue Ridge is hosting a virtual community open house on December 11th where participants can provide their feedback on reducing roadway fatalities and serious injuries in our region. It'll take place on Zoom, and there's a public survey as well. The information for this online can be found at the TJPDC's website, and as well as movesafelyblueridge.com. That's movesafelyblueridge.com.
And one thing to note about that is the survey is available through December 6th, so please take it if you haven't already.
And I just want to remind everyone about the grand illumination that's going to be this Friday at the Pavilion. There's going to be lots of activities. Some vendors will be there. I think the Charlottesville Choir is going to be there. It's going to be a really nice event. And I think about 7:15, 7:20, we're going to do the lighting. So please try to come out. Are there any recognitions this month? I don't think we have any, do we? Okay. The next matter is community matters, and so there are, we have 6 pre-registered speakers, leaving 10 slots for community matters. Each speaker will be given up to 3 minutes to speak, and we'll now open the floor to those who have pre-registered to speak. And the first one is Susan.
Hi, good evening. Happy
Hello.
holidays. Susan Cruz, Executive Director of the Community Climate Collaborative. In June of 2017, then President Donald Trump announced the United States withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement. It was a devastating blow for climate action, and just 4 months later, the Community Climate Collaborative was born. That same year, the city of Charlottesville joined the Global Covenant of Mayors to declare that we are still in for climate and energy commitments. C3 and Charlottesville city government recognized then, as we do now, that communities hold immense power to address climate change. When federal action slows, our cities can still advance toward a just and sustainable future. We understand the challenge. We have only 5 years to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 45%, and 4 of those years fall under a new Trump administration. Local climate action remains our strongest and most empowering path forward. That's why when our team learned about the upcoming grant opportunity for clean school buses, we were thrilled to hear that the city was considering a submission for funding. The 2024 EPA Clean School Bus Rebate Program presents an excellent opportunity for the City of Charlottesville to continue its pursuit of zero emissions transit in Charlottesville. As a mother of 2 boys who attend our city schools, I would love to see zero-emission school buses deployed to pick up our kids. It would signify our city's commitment toward their health and their future. The city of Charlottesville will not be able to reach our climate goals without the support of every sector of our community, and we need our city to lead the way. While we cannot predict what will happen during the next Trump administration, we are confident that there will be fewer federal funding opportunities over the next 4 years. Now is the time to take action and invest in our shared mission to cut emissions locally. The city sustainability and transit teams have already proven that they are ready to lead on climate. And the C3 team is ready to support them in building the future we know is possible. We believe in your power to make a difference. Let's do this together, and please let us know if we can be of any assistance in this application. This is just such a great opportunity for the city to get some of this funding for our schools, for our kids, and for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. The next speaker, Ms. O'Flynn.
Saivo Flynn. I'm a climate justice policy manager with C3 as well. I am, new to Charlottesville. I came here in April. Since coming to Charlottesville, I have been really impressed and I would say extremely surprised by just how ambitious this city is with its climate action plan, with its decarbonization goals, with the level of collaboration between people in the city side and different community organizations. It's been inspiring. I think it is no coincidence that Charlottesville is the city where a little organization like C3 is able to flourish in pursuing climate justice on a local level, is able to flourish and also grow and set a great example for collaborative models for other locations as well. We're able to do that because of the strong collaborative leadership that is shown by our city council and our representatives. I've been really impressed as well by the open channels of communication. I think it's why Charlottesville is able to pursue such ambitious decarbonization goals and strategies. I was lucky enough to join the group going to Champaign-Urbana back last month, or well, just over a month ago now, where we saw an example of a low, no emission bus fleet for the city of Champaign-Urbana, and to see how inspired our leadership was by that infrastructure and by the ambition and the passion for decarbonization that they all showed. I would like to echo Susan and say that we're really, really happy to hear that there is this intention to pursue or a drive to pursue this funding for the clean school buses. It feels like that is an excellent opportunity, and we have to be really ambitious in pursuing every available opportunity, because as we know, that federal funding is not likely to continue, and this is maybe the last opportunity that we have for 4 years to get more funding for clean buses for schools, which is vitally important for our children's health and for our community's health. So really happy to help you all and to support you all in pursuing this, and thank you so much for the vision that you all show.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Delgado.
Hi,
Hello.
my name is Sarah Delgado, and I work for the Community Climate Collaborative doing community engagement and youth work. And I have a kid currently enrolled at Jackson Via Elementary School. I want to thank the council members for your work this year committing to greening the CAT transit system with clean fuel technologies. And I'm here to call on you both as a climate justice advocate and a Charlottesville parent to bring the same commitment to the school buses that are serving children and families in the Charlottesville community. The exhaust from diesel tailpipe emissions pollutes neighborhoods in Charlottesville throughout the year, affecting kids at schools and throughout the city. And the EPA grant application for electric school bus funding is fast approaching on January 9th. This might be the last chance to secure federal funding for clean school buses. Why leave money on the table for an initiative that brings us closer to the city's 2030 benchmark climate goals and helps the health and well-being of the community? We have shown in the C3 Alternative Fuel Buses report released last year that the reliability and range of battery electric buses has been steadily increasing. So we should continue to invest in this technology for the future of the city. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Donna?
I'm a lot shorter. Hi, I'm Donna Shaughnessy. I live on Birdwood Road, and I am here in two capacities. One, I don't work for C3. One is that I'm chair of the local Sierra Club, and so we as a whole have been really excited about supporting the city and the county in efforts to get fossil fuels out of our neighborhoods, and so this is we really heartily endorse applying for this funding, which is, as other speakers have said, last chance before the door shuts for quite a while, and so we're really very supportive of this whole effort. I'm also here as a person who is a climate activist. I spend a lot of my time trying to push back against fossil fuels, and I'm doing everything I can personally because I am terrified about what's to come. The more I read, the scarier it gets. And I used to think, oh, I'm sorry I didn't have grandchildren, but now I'm glad. When I see the tipping points that are facing us, things are going to be really bad really soon. And so if we can do anything here in Charlottesville to try to hold the line a little bit, that would be great. So I urge you to apply for this grant. It looks like a winner to me. So thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Everett Coster. I hope I pronounced your last name right.
Good evening. My name is Everett Kester, and I am a junior here at Charlottesville High School. I'm here today to urge you to apply for a grant that would allow the city to purchase electric school buses for the city schools. These electric buses would reduce pollution and improve air quality, as well as show the city's commitment to our climate action plan. This directly affects my life as a student. I don't even ride the bus, but I walk to school like every day, and I have to walk through clouds of emissions, and it's kind of gross. So with electric school buses, this would be a thing of the past. So by applying for this grant, the city would also show even more initiative, as well as inspiring citizens of Charlottesville to consider purchasing electric vehicles for themselves. Considering the future presidential administration, along with the deadline of the grant, which is again on January 9th, there may not be many more opportunities like this left. The city has made so much good progress with being on the forefront of climate action, and this grant would only improve our standing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Lila Castle.
Hello, my name is Lila Castleman, and I am a junior at Charlottesville High School and a member of our environmental club, Green Bacon. I am here to support the city applying for the EPA grant for clean school buses. I want to start by thanking you for the work you have done already in support of sustainability and the environment. However, I'm aware that there is still much work to be done. I have to admit, I was surprised and disappointed to hear that we have missed prior opportunities for green school buses. There's money here for these buses. There's the support and the infrastructure existing to make electrical school buses feasible. And not only will these buses make the world we inherit cleaner and safer, but it protects our health and our lungs from the fumes of school buses. It frightens me to know that this could be our last chance at funding for the foreseeable future, considering the past climate policies of President-elect Donald Trump. I hope you take this opportunity to demonstrate your continued support of the environment and to invest in the sustainability of our transport and our city. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the last of the pre-registered speakers. Are there others here that like to speak? We have opportunity for 10 others. Please, sir.
Good evening. My name
evening.
is John Woodruff, live in southern Belmont. I just wanted to speak on the parking memo that you all are discussing this evening. I would like to oppose that memo as it stands. I live on a small street in Belmont. It's tight, but we work around it. I do walk to work through Belmont. I do see business vehicles or trailers parked on the street. I think it's, now everybody has space on their property to park these business vehicles or business personal property. It's the taxes on the residents, there's a tax on the vehicle, there's a tax on the trailer, there's a tax on the personal equipment of the business. There's also a tax on the business income, but then they're not allowed to, have it on the street in the city. I don't think that's fair. There's the dual wheel vehicles that you also have in the proposed ordinance. Walking here from work, I passed by a City Walk, and there's a dual-wheeled moving vehicle U-Haul truck sitting on parked on the city street. So, if that were parked out on the street after this ordinance, or if this ordinance would be passed, would they get a ticket for just trying to move in or move out of an apartment? I also have family that travel and live in a short school bus. If buses are not allowed to park on city streets for a few days at a time, are they allowed in Charlottesville to visit? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else? Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Dave Judd, and this is entirely anecdotal, but I bought a Nissan Leaf in 2016 and drove it for 6 years and 60,000 miles, and it didn't cost me a penny except for tires and electricity. So the maintenance on that was like zip. And followed that up with a Bolt, and we drove that down to South Carolina, and with stop for just recharge for lunch, and made it back, and we've driven it to Washington, and again, we haven't had to pay anything for it, and nothing's coming out of the tailpipe. And nobody's had the opportunity to steal our catalytic converter because it doesn't have one. So I don't know about electric buses for sure, but if my experience with electric cars is applicable, I highly recommend you're pursuing it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else would like to speak? There'll be another opportunity at the end of the meeting. Yes.
Yes, hello. Mo Van de Sample, 608 Cabell Avenue. I was just looking into the proposed Smart Street changes, and I understand that, of course, you've gone over budget on a lot of these things, so you do have to make cancellations and changes. I would request that you take a closer look at the priorities that you're coming up with. It seems like it seems very odd to me to start working on Fontaine Street, which is relatively far from like a lot of pedestrian and urban like infrastructure. And then you're canceling work that would help make like the street on Barracks Road and Emmett Street. You're decreasing the commitments there, or just outright canceling them in places that people are actually regularly trying to bike and walk. It just seems like misaligned priorities. Similarly, you had something on, what was it, 5th Street and Ridge. Again, like smack dab in a big neighborhood that a lot of people do enjoy walking around in, and we're canceling these things to instead like maintain this Fontaine thing where you're putting up pedestrian lights, you're putting up like large sidewalks, but people tend to bike and walk in places either where they live or where there are things to do, right, or work. And that just doesn't describe that area. It seems odd to be prioritizing putting this work, the money that we have left there, rather than in the more urban parts of Charlottesville. Secondly, I wanted to restate something that I'd mentioned 2 weeks ago, which is I really hope that you are much more liberal than the Board of Review was in these CAFE standards that you're setting. And then finally, I think you should really take a look into why so many of these projects are coming in so far over budget. I get that it's like a bit of a joke to say, oh, we need to make like these government projects more efficient. I get it's very hard to do that, but this is like completely beyond the pale, and there's got to be some regulations that can be cut, some reviews that can be removed to make these things happen faster. It's just got to be possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak? Sam, I did have a question. Maybe I just missed it, but is there a grant for electric school buses? Okay.
Yes, there is a grant. That's the basis of the comments that have been made.
Is it a grant that we have applied for? Or that we are considering applying for, or what's the status?
Yeah, I requested an answer on that, and I don't have an
There's-
answer.
Our grant manager's here.
Oh.
Microphone.
I wasn't sure that you were associated with that.
Taylor, Grants Program Manager.
Yes.
So we applied for the 2023 grant cycle, and we received $420,000 in rebates. And once it's all said and done, it'll probably get about a $409,000 rebate for the 2 buses that should come online in 2025.
But and that's different than
It's the same
one that's
grant.
upcoming?
It's the same grant, just a different year. So we got 2023, 2024 is currently open.
Okay. So,
And are we applying for 24?
We're evaluating it.
Okay.
More questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll add that our sustainability team is not available for me to have been able to get additional questions posed and answered, so I will
Would they be
do
the
that.
ones we would ask about what the evaluation
Yes.
considerations are?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
and I guess I'd just throw in that if it's no big pitfalls or logistics, that, I think we should try to apply for it,
And that's great that we were successful last year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so, again, I wasn't sure she was coming to speak, so, we'll have another opportunity to speak at the end of the meeting for the public. The next matter we have is the consent agenda. Ms. Thomas, will you read the consent agenda, please?
Consent agenda number 2, minutes, November 18th, 2024 regular meeting. 3, resolution to appropriate funds from the Supreme Court of Virginia Recovery Court docket grant in the amount of $240,000 for the Charlottesville-Albemarle Recovery Court, second reading. Number 4, resolution to appropriate $408,437 from the Opioid Abatement Authority Collaborative Partnership Grant, second reading. 5, resolution to reallocate funds from the Meadow Creek Trail and Bridges Project, $253,697, or for the Meadow Creek Trail and Bridges Project, sorry. 6, resolution to reallocate and appropriate Parks and Recreation CIP funds to the Rugby Avenue Trail CIP, $155,000. 7, resolution to appropriate funding from the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development, Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS, HIV grant, 24 HOPWA 303, in the amount of $389,312, one of 2 readings. 8, resolution to appropriate Bama Works special event funding, $38,700, one of 2 readings.
Okay. Do we have to, do we need a motion for that?
Sure. I move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, can we vote? The consent agenda passes 5-0. The next item is the city manager's report.
Ben Chambers is going to speak to you about the VO agreement.
Yeah, so tonight I'm here to give you an update on our dockless mobility permit. The first thing everyone asks me is, what is that? And the answer is scooters. It's the scooters you see on the street. VO is our current operator. They have a permit with us. It's called the Dockless Mobility Permit Program. People ask what sort of contract we have with the company. It's through this permit program. We revised the permit program back in May of 23. There were a lot of issues that VO had with the permit, and there were a lot of issues that we had with the permit. Our biggest issue was, and still is, the parking of the scooters within public right-of-way in places where it makes it difficult for some of our users to get around. New regulations included in that permit update included the ability for VO to fine their own users who are parking improperly. So that has been a major change that we've had in the past year and a half. Hasn't really changed the performance of the system at all. We're still looking at about 250,000 rides a year. That's translating into 300-some thousand miles of scooter usage on our streets. Every fall, VO does a big survey with their users to sort of figure out what's going on with their users. Why are they using this service? Are they appreciating the service? Right now, 34% of their users don't have a car. Not surprisingly, many of their users are UVA students. So we're actually pretty glad that they are not bringing their cars out from out of town and parking them on our streets. Additionally, 17% of these folks aren't licensed to drive a car. Even if they had a car, they wouldn't be able to drive it. The ones who do drive cars have said, 78% of them have said, this decreases the amount of usage that they are using their car. Additionally, this is making folks feel like they have more choice, that they are more independent, that they can get around our community much more easily. For some of them, there are challenges getting around our community, and they are overcoming those challenges by doing some things we don't like them doing, like riding on the sidewalk. All of the scooters say don't ride on the sidewalk, and yet 42% of their users are saying, yeah, I do it anyway. And I think all of us kind of understand that that's what's happening. More than half of them said, I would definitely cut it out, though, if there was a protected bike lane next to that sidewalk, or if there was a protected shared use path nearby for me to take. Out of any other deterrent that they listed, whether it was fines or just, someone saying on the scooter, visibly saying, get off the sidewalk, they said, I wouldn't listen to any of that. I would listen if there was a protected bike lane here. So that is pointing us towards sort of infrastructure that we need in order to make this program continue to be successful. We do still have issues with parking on our streets. Right now, there are multiple ways for you to report that to VO. You can do it through the MyCville app, you can do it through the VO app, you can do it by phone, or you can email them at hello@VORide. The fastest way now to get to them is through the MyCville app. Previously, it would have to go through city staff, and we have redirected it. Now it goes straight to the local VO office, doesn't go through VO corporate, doesn't go through us, it goes straight to them. So that's actually how city staff now reports things to VO, is through the MyCville app. We recommend everybody in the city do the same. There's also been a bit of a change in how these violations have been sort of called out and then actually enforced. Back in 23, when we first started talking about VO administering their own fines, they weren't really being proactive about those fines themselves. They were being reactive to the complaints that they were getting from the residents in town and from the reports that city staff and UVA staff were making. That has changed this year. Last year, we had 700 reports, and they gave violations to about half of them. They had 360 violations in 2023. Just in October alone this year, they had 240 violations that they gave out to their users. Through all of 2024 to date, they're at about 1,800 violations that they've given out, and the amount of reports that they've gotten has not changed. This is actually their staff going out and proactively figuring out, hey, this scooter isn't in the right place. We need to flag this for our review team so that they can take a look at this and see if this user is operating the vehicle correctly. So that has changed sort of their relationship with their users and their relationship with us. They've also added on a new person to their staff who is just going around the city and looking at these problem locations. Before, they just had the staff that was working back at the shop, maintaining the vehicles, and they had the staff who was going around and picking up the vehicles, servicing when they ran out of battery, that sort of thing. But they didn't have somebody who was just keeping an eye out, and that's all they did. That is a new addition that they've added this year, and that is part of what is bearing out these changes in the amount of violations that they're giving out to their users.
Ben, I'm sorry, sir. Quick question. When did that person start? Do you know?
It was at the beginning of this UVA session, so it would have been August, September time period.
Okay.
Yeah. So they've had quite a spike over the most recent months, but it's been sort of a big build as they change their approach. So as my last bullet on this slide notes, most of these violations are coming from them at this point. Last year, it was coming from us as city staff, and UVA staff actually had a really heavy hand in that as well. This year, totally switched the relationship on that.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's a great thing, because what we were saying a year ago is we can't handle this all ourselves as staff. This is your responsibility as a permit holder to make sure that you're doing this right, and they're stepping up and taking care of that this year. It's getting better, like I'm saying, but it's not quite there yet. We know that we're still seeing a lot of issues on our sidewalks, in our crosswalks, on our curb ramps. VO is issuing fines for improper parking. They are now providing safety training and parking training at sign up like we asked them to, and they also have a new slow speed mode for new users to get used to the vehicles so they're not sort of just hitting it as soon as they get on the scooter the first time. We have started testing over the past year and a half hub parking. We've had some painted ones and some virtual ones. You may have seen the big orange ones like you see in this picture, but there's also virtual ones that you don't see with the naked eye, but they're all in the VO app. If you pull up the map, you can see where all of them are. They're mostly around UVA grounds. On UVA grounds, they use forced parking. They say you have to park in these virtual spots. In the city, which is mostly around UVA grounds, Rugby Grady area, JPA, we have some of these hub locations, but they are suggested zones. That has sort of been our approach the whole time, mostly based on feedback from VO of it's really hard for us to create enough zones for this to still work the same way that it does when you don't have these hubs. We have found that the management of this parking isn't just something we can throw an app at or hubs at or fines at. It has to be sort of a combination of all of that, plus physical staff presence and clear instructions for the users. So we are yes.
Can you back up to the last slide
so.
quickly? I know I've made this point before, so excuse me for repeating it again, but I think it would be useful to have a picture of a scooter instead of the words Dockless Mobility Hub.
We're actually going to get away from using the physical ones going forward because the virtual ones are so much easier to maintain and move around when we need to.
Yeah. One of the other things that I noticed, because I had a work event last week that had a shuttle that left downtown to go out to the venue, which was great. So not everyone had to drive, but I didn't want to have to park. So I used a scooter to get to the shuttle, and I left the scooter in one of the orange squares. And when I came back, someone had moved it from, it was the exact same one because I scanned it to go home. Someone had moved it from the orange square onto the sidewalk, presumably so they could drive a car into that space.
Yeah, that's what we've seen with a lot of these hubs. We've seen, a lot of delivery drivers think that that's their parking space for their temporary little pickup at local businesses. We've also seen some of it is just vandalism by college kids thinking that they're being funny. We ran into an incident with that at this specific location that we have a picture of, where it was clearly college kids who were coming out and rearranging the scooters every night because they thought it was funny. So there's a range of reasons why people don't put them in those boxes, but I don't know.
But if we do have barriers, whether or not it's digitally or with an orange box, having some kind of physical structure to prevent a car from taking that space from the scooters would also be helpful.
Yeah, we're also looking at these as potential locations for expansion for bike parking, which we could use as both a mix of dockless mobility parking and regular bike parking. Since we sort of laid out, this is the space for it, those are appropriate locations for us to add bike parking in the future. Yeah. All right, so what are we doing with the permit itself? Similar to 2 years ago when I was first brought on here, we're going to look at doing some changes to the permit again to make it a little bit easier for both parties. This is a permit that we have been annually updating. So the first thing that VO came to us with before we even started discussing the other changes was, can we make this more of a permanent relationship? Can we make this a multi-year permit? We understand that allows them a little bit more flexibility of standing up more staff here because they know that they'll be here for a longer period of time. That also encourages VO to invest long-term in the infrastructure and capital that they're putting into our community. They are currently going through a cycle of updating all of their scooters in their fleet, so determining which cities are getting which parts of their fleet kind of depends on how much permit and how much fleet size they're allowed to have in a city. So there are some things that they're looking for from this update, but more so we have a lot of changes that we want to make to this update, partly to clarify things for them and for us, because it's kind of hard for us to manage with some vague language in our permit. So while we're working through that, we're just going to extend the current permit for about 6 months. If we finish the revisions before then the new permit would kick in with the new regulations, and that new permit would be potentially for a multi-year period instead of just year to year. The year to year was initially set up as part of the pilot program that was associated with this, and we're kind of, we're admitting now that we're not in a pilot phase anymore. This is a part of our ecosystem of travel. So investing in that for the long term, and we're hoping to make these changes to our regulations. We're working through this with VO and with the UVA staff because we want to make sure that all of these work with them. First, we want to address the parking issues. We have shown that the virtual hubs have worked around the UVA area and that the forced parking on UVA is a more effective way of dealing with this overall. The problem has always been, how do you get that ubiquity throughout our entire community? It's pretty easy to set up those hubs on UVA because there are pretty specific bottleneck points where people are going on UVA grounds. It's a little more difficult with our community, and so we need VO to tell us, what does that transition plan look like? How do you get to a point where you have a more orderly parking system throughout the city, but you still don't lose that benefit of the ubiquity of access, that everyone can find a scooter relatively quickly within a quick distance from wherever they're starting their trip. So we want to be able to move in that direction, but not lose the benefits that we have currently from the system. Also, we want our users of that system to understand where they're supposed to be parking a little bit better. Right now, you can see where these virtual hubs are on your map. We would like there to be pictures so that when the app is pointing you to a hub, you can actually see what you're looking for. VO has also been working with a company, and you may have read recently that VO is going to be introducing AI everywhere. And it's a little bit of a hype. It's actually just, it is AI, but it is teaching you where you're supposed to be parking. It's a very simple program. It's not doing anything nefarious or even actually that advanced. It's just telling you where to park. That app they've been using in European markets, not specifically with VO, but with some of their competitors that are in the European markets, and they've seen a reduction in parking violations by about 80% in the markets that are using this very simple directional tool. VO is looking at incorporating that, but we want to make sure that that is actually effective and that we're seeing the results that they're promising on that. There's also some fines that we want to clarify with the permit holder. Right now, we have the ability to fine them if they don't show up within a certain amount of time of us reporting a scooter. That puts a lot of onus on city staff to both find the scooter in the first place and then come back an hour later and see if it's still there. It's hard to cover a lot of ground in the city when there's just me and my 2 staff members looking for those things. So we're looking to make that a little easier on us, but also make it a little clearer on who is the one doing reporting, who's doing the following up, and who's administering the fines to VO. One thing that we have run into with VO over the summer specifically was staffing was an issue. Some of the issues that we were running into when we were saying, hey, you guys aren't getting out here quickly enough, were because they did not have enough staff people actually operating the system. You need several people at all times of day, and they just didn't have that coverage, especially on nights and weekends. So we would like to make sure that we are continuously monitoring that from our side as the permit managers so that we understand what their staffing plan is for the month and if they're able to maintain that staffing so that we can advise them more properly on what fleet size they should be running. Right now, they have a maximum fleet size of 700 and they stay there pretty much all the time. But if they aren't able to maintain that fleet, if they're not able to get out there and move those vehicles around so that they're not just stuck in some neighborhood for a week solid, then they're not managing their fleet, and we need to constrain that fleet a little bit lower. So we need to set some standards for staff performance for them. And then lastly, we want to address some information sharing. We ask for a lot of data in our permit program requirements, and they just sort of dump data on us on a regular basis, and it's just swimming through a flood of data. We'd like it to be standardized and simplified for us so that we're looking at a monthly report that just lays out sort of the basics. And having that standardized and simplified, we'd also like to see that shared with the public, both on VO's website and on the city's website going forward, so that people don't have to come to me and say, what's going on with VO? We can point to VO and say, VO is telling you what's going on with VO, and they can tell you what's going on with violations. They can tell you what's going on with ridership. They can tell you what's going on with the mileage that is being put on their scooters. We'd like to capture all of that and make it shareable for people so that we understand what's going on with VO and understand how to support it more going forward. And that's all we have. If you have any questions, I'm all ears.
Yeah, I think this, before I guess was educated on the topic several years ago, I was very much like, I hate scooters, like I'd pick them up and with some sort of grabbing device and make a boat anchor out of them, sort of how I felt, until I saw these statistics of how many cars they take off the road, managing, and then obviously the climate impacts that has as well, and managing where people leave these scooters, obviously has been, I think, the hardest thing in terms of at least the feedback that we've gotten from folks. It's difficult to be able to say sort of objectively, okay, we have a problem of this size, because it almost always feels anecdotal in terms of this person saw this and they're really annoyed with us, and they make sure we all know that. I guess we're doing the best we can, really, in terms of the work that y'all have done piloting this, and that VO sounds like they've been a good partner, and you're going to continue to tailor the contract going forward. The things that you brought up seem like reasonable paths forward, and reasonable things to work on. Do you still find are you going to do an RFP for any scooter provider for the next go-round, or how's
No,
that?
that's a good question to clarify on our permit. This permit is open to any provider that wants to step up and put forward a proposal. They don't have to do it on an annual basis. They can come to me anytime and say, we'd like to jump in, we'd love to see what our service can do. Currently, there's not a lot of people poking around and asking. We did have some interest maybe, I don't know, a year and a half from a company or two, but yeah, it seems like VO is pretty much locked down the market for them, and there haven't been much interest in
It sounds like it's a good partnership, though, with them.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess we're trying to be thoughtful in terms of balancing our needs and the customer, our citizens' needs, with not making it too onerous on VO to actually run a service that benefits us.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, by allowing them some liberty to operate on our street, we're getting some benefit, but at some point it gets a little bit out of hand and you need to manage it a little bit. And so we've been working with VO to sort of figure out where those boundaries are.
Okay. So it sounds like things are moving in a positive direction in terms of the overall.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Michael, do you have any comment on this? No. Natalie?
I was never anti-scooter, but I also am heartened to see the statistics that you showed us, where for the past 3 quarters it's been increasing, and Q4 so far is on track to exceed Q3 as well. And then the fact that 78% of people reported that they were able to decrease car use, which I think is the most exciting part of that, not just for climate reasons, but for safety, for space and land use purposes. That's really great to see, and I've done it, and it's handy to just be able to get to where you need to go quickly.
Yeah, and I should also note that the increased ridership is a benefit to the city also financially as part of this permit. We also collect permit fees based on a per ride value that brings in about $45,000 a year that goes towards our bike infrastructure fund. So it's got an added benefit on top of that that supports other modes as well.
That's amazing. It's kind of like a positive feedback loop, which is great. Some of the notes that I wrote down during your presentation were that the survey results about how people use it and how their behavior can be changed point to the fact that it's not an enforcement problem, it's not a fine problem. Fines end up just being the cost of doing business. People will say, okay, I'm okay with paying this fine if I can do whatever I want. So it's really punitive actions don't work. It's really a problem we have to design our way out of, which is the constrained parking spaces, which is adding the bike lanes, and those benefit not just bikers, but the scooter users. So that's a longer term investment that the city has to make. Something that I'm not sure how this process is going to work with the AI and the maps and the parking zones, but you're right that it is kind of a density problem. Like UVA, tighter space, people know where they're going, all within that zone a little more. In Charlottesville, as a city, going to be more diverse. You're going to either need lots of spaces everywhere, or, I mean, ideally that would be the easiest way to be a user for the system. So what it's going to mean for people, the same way as if you're in a car, you're not going to get princess parking every time, but hopefully people will be able to see where the nearest parking spot is for their destination.
Yes, and the idea is that there would be enough of them that you're basically looking at least one on every block.
Great.
And it would be in some similar locations, like that space in between the stop sign and that first parked car.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a place where we'd be looking to put some of these hubs.
Okay, great, because that's another thing for removing barriers to entry is making it intuitive or something you don't even have to check an app for. You just know, like, okay, there's going to be one within a block. I'll head there. Yeah. So that's great. Cool. Thank you very much.
Lloyd?
Just follow up on that a little bit. Do we have any sort of a program or a plan or a three-step procedure or anything that basically allows us to designate exactly what you were just talking with Natalie about there, the notion that there should be one of these places every block or two or three, or do we have some standard like that we're able to apply over time?
Yeah, we haven't worked through that with VO quite yet. That's what we're discussing with them in this 6-month period. We're either discussing with them, hey, what is the plan and can we put into effect July 1, or what is the plan to make progress on this plan that we need to build into the permit itself, so that we can hold you to that progress that we need to make in expanding this required parking hub system citywide. But today we don't have that plan and don't have the 1, 2, 3 steps of how we get to that plan quite yet.
Do I recall that our VO scooters won't go onto the university grounds?
No, they do go onto the university grounds, yes.
I thought there was some.
They have a memorandum of understanding with VO that as long as they have a permit with us, they're allowed to operate on university grounds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And does the county have the same kind of program that we do?
No, the county does not have VO, and I have not heard of any changes to that coming up. Yeah.
Sometimes you see them on the side of the road, right where the county line is.
Yeah, there is a 3/4 mile buffer around the city boundary that they're allowed to get that far out, but as you get further and further out, the scooter slows down more and more.
Just a
and more until it
geofencing kind of a thing?
Yeah, exactly.
I wondered why last night I saw 3 scooters in the bike lane on John Warner Parkway.
Yep, there's a little
They
dead
must have
zone.
run out of the-
Yeah, there's a little dead zone right there that I think might be a geofence issue that they just need to correct. But yeah, I noticed the same scooters last night myself.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So I had a couple of comments and questions. I'm supportive. I use this scooter, like a Vespa type of scooter, to get around, and I'm glad that it reduces the traffic, the vehicles on the road. But I also do a lot of walking just randomly in different places in the city, and people will tell you as I'm doing my walking meetings that I always have to stop and move the scooters from the sidewalk, and it irks me. And I'm like, because if I were in a wheelchair or something, and Sam just kind of talked about this before, our commitment to ADA, just like I'm not sure if it's possible. And I think that and they have options. I think they just, and it's not out in, near the county line. It's right there where they just stop it sometimes right at the intersection and just leave it. And I think that we need to do more to incentivize or disincentive them to put it where it should be. And I think that money, I think we could have a nice space right there on the side of the road, and they just won't do it because they can just hop off. So I may be the lone voice in this, but I think that, at least for certain things, we may need to continue year to year, or we need to enforce that, because just like you, with your tight schedule, you can't go out and enforce the one person. I'm glad that he or she is out there, but it will be hard for them to do it as well. We get, we have citizens that sends us pictures all the time of these things left in inappropriate places. So anyway, that just happened to be one of my pet peeves. I'm sorry.
No, I get it.
Makes sense. Could I ask, it seems like last time we talked about this, it was sort of a 2 or 3 strikes and you were out if you did that?
Yeah, so I think it's 4 strikes actually. So it's, yeah, they have an escalating fine structure that concludes with you're expelled from the system.
Is that still the case?
It is still the case. I don't know that they've actually gotten to that case with many of their users. They've, as I said, put out 1,800 violations in the past year. They have 7,000 users or so.
Okay.
So not everybody's being hit by these, and the ones who are, probably not that much repeat business going on.
Okay.
I just have one, since we are talking about VEO, if you could use your mic to plug the VEO Access program,
Yeah, sure.
just
So
to tell people about it.
So one of the things that VEO offers is an access program. It is a monthly program for low-income residents who, if you're qualify for any other low-income program, you qualify for this program. It gives you a low-price monthly pass that gives you, I think it's a $5 pass. It gives you free unlock fees. So anytime you unlock a scooter right now, if you're just a regular user, it's $1 to start. And then after that, it's a certain per minute fee after that. With VEO Access, that first $1 is gone and the per minute fee is reduced, and you get 1 free ride every day. So it can be a very useful tool for a lot of people in our community.
And there is a education part, because I understand part of UVA's hospital emergency room is not serious accidents, but quite a bit of accidents and things. So, a lot of them don't wear helmets and things. So,
yeah, they have added educational elements to their app. We're encouraging them as part of their requirements that they already have as part of their permit to do more outreach with the UVA community and do more education, especially with the first years who are coming into this, and this is the first time they've had that taste of freedom. So, yeah.
And just one thing for that I would like to point out for the general public is when you think about the damage being done by a scooter accident versus the damage being done by a car accident, know that they are in no way equivalent. And that's something to keep in mind as we talk about it being a replacement for car trips. It's also a replacement for car accidents.
So, Sam, what's the next step?
Just a couple things just to confirm. Because we all have had a lot of repeat inquiry about VEO specifically. Just confirming for the public's benefit as well that there is no further action by this council as it relates to the extension of this agreement. The ability to have the scooters operating was the decision that council made previously, and that's the extent of it. The agreement is an operational matter, so that would come to me, and I would pass that back to Ben saying, continue. The basis for tonight's presentation and discussion was so that I, along with Mr. Chambers, could hear, is there a desire to not extend this agreement? Is there a desire to remove scooters from being an option? is there a desire that he, Ben, add a series of additional conditions to operating? I have not heard that. So I'm just confirming that that is what we were looking for this evening. So I feel like he knows what to do now, and I want to always make sure when someone walks that microphone, they walk away knowing what they're supposed to do. But just so the public can hear that the moment that some people have asked for is the removal of scooters. And you all are indicating that you continue to support scooters, so we're going to move forward to ensure that an agreement gets signed for a 6-month extension with the possibility that it could be a longer term within that 6-month period if we come to terms with them.
Yeah.
That's where we are, and those are the next steps.
Yeah, I would like to see more, informational enforcement after the person has been on, I guess, another 6 months or so, and to see if that's having an impact on what we're seeing, at least what I'm seeing, I should say.
Yeah, I can definitely get that from VO for you.
Thank you.
And for me, my part in listening was to make sure that when I get the agreement, I know what to look for before I'm signing it. And he knows that now.
Yeah.
You know
Any
now.
other comments or?
I have additional, thank you, Ben.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
2 other items, just because we're still in my report.
Yeah.
Just wanted to remind the public 2 event moments that are coming up. Grand Illumination is this Friday, Ting Pavilion, 5 o'clock. Come one, come all. Unfortunately, I won't be there, but I'll be on vacation where I really need to be. And the City Manager's Budget Forum is at Carver on the 12th at 6 p.m. And we invite all members of the public to come and engage with me in a discussion about the budget. That's my report.
No. Okay, thank you. The next item are action items, and the first one is ordinance amending the city code for parking buses and trucks, et cetera. Mr. Freeze? Oh, I'm sorry.
Since we kind of went into a long discussion last time, I'll kind of not go through it all again, but I did kind of send out a clarification memo that's attached to the council's packet. I'm here to, discuss that, answer any other questions that might have arisen or that you had coming out off of that before you guys make your final decision.
I just want to quickly follow up on what our Community Matters speaker mentioned about like family coming to visit in a small bus. They could get a permit from the city for that bus while they're here, right?
Yeah, you could get the just the
temporary
temporary
pass.
parking pass, and technically under today's ordinance that wouldn't be allowed either. The dually requirement and the bus and tractor trailer requirement is already in the city ordinance. We talked about it a little bit last week about enforcement of these. It's not something that police are regularly going out and looking for these violations. We have had it in certain instances where, someone is leaving or parking, a bus or something like that, and it's there for a month or 2 months, and the residents around are like, hey, what's going on? And, they'll contact the police. So it's really a complaint-driven enforcement at this point in time. I don't anticipate that changing, even if we, adjust the parking code as presented.
And you when you use the phrase vehicles with more than 2 wheels per axle, you're talking about what informally is called a dually?
Correct.
Okay, right. So I appreciated your memo. It was very helpful, and so your priorities were in, I guess, descending order. Number 1, semi-trucks, and then all the way down to 6 were boats and RVs, and 7 were trailers. The only, for me, I still think that, well, a couple of things. I think that the tarp situation, that's a no-brainer. We should follow what you've got here in terms of people can't have tarps covering over their, the identification of their vehicle. I think the piece you said about farm use and antique plates, if they want to have those vehicles in the city, then they need to pay the appropriate, get the inspections or whatever they need for those. Otherwise, they can be on their front yard, I guess, or backyard. Let's see, 6 was, yeah. So again, for me, 6 and 7, boats and RVs. As I was driving down to Georgia for the holiday, I was looking at the various types of RVs that are out there. Most, I guess, pull behind, pop-up campers or small little RVs are not dualies. They don't have 4 wheels on the rear axle, but the large motorhomes do. So I would support. I still think that 6 and 7 on your list. I would not. I would go along with to the effect that, or if they have more than 2 wheels per axle. So if a trailer that someone has for their job, for a landscaping business, if it's just got 2 wheels per axle, I don't have a problem with that. If it's got 4, then I think that is an appropriate dividing line. And the same for RVs or boat trailers. If they're heavy enough to have, big enough to have 4 wheels per axle, then they don't need to be on the roads. But if otherwise, I don't have a problem with them existing. So that's where I am on it.
Lloyd?
I was trying to see as we were talking here about the issue dealing with antique vehicles, and what struck me was I had not realized that the antique vehicle license plate is authorized for use only for vehicles that are not used for general transportation purposes, including not being used for daily travel to and from a place of employment, but shall only be used for participation in club activities, exhibits, tours, parades, and similar events. That is a regulation that is more honored in the breach, I think, than in the observance. I don't know how many times we have parades in Charlottesville, and certainly the parades tend not to be in the heavily congested areas of Route 29 at 5 p.m. But I've been struck generally by the question of to what extent people who may have over the years, rightly or wrongly, come to rely on the notion that I have a right to park my antique vehicle here. I have a right to have a farm use vehicle. I know of one instance of a farm use vehicle on Locust Avenue, which doesn't have many farms anymore, that the neighbors were getting very upset about. And the police felt that they didn't have the ability to enforce the rule, which led me to an email that I sent, I guess, late last night, early this morning, inquiring as to whether anybody had talked with the police department or with the traffic division to find out, are there legal rulings or opinions that have been expressed by the local judges or anything else that would make some of these things, some of these changes either easier or more difficult? Do we know? Is there anything we're dealing with there that would be a problem?
The only one that I know that's a new one recently is the farm use. I know it used to be you could go to Tractor Supply and just buy a farm use license plate and throw it on the vehicle. Those are actually, you have to go through the DMV for those now. That's within the last year or so that this state actually passed that, so you do have to have a licensed farm use vehicle that's through the DMV now, and not just a vehicle that you decide to throw that on. So that is, I guess, somewhat easier to enforce because it should still have the farm use. I don't know if the comments that you've gotten before about enforcement were related around that or just not knowing. You're allowed to drive, and this doesn't necessarily prohibit anyone from driving an antique vehicle on the city streets or driving a farm use vehicle on the streets. It's really that overnight parking that we're trying to stop. So, it's not going to solve all the issues around this, especially when you're talking about people driving the antique vehicles. For me and staff, that when we were talking about this, it really, for the antique vehicle side of things, it really came back to being able to identify broken down and abandoned vehicles. Because without that antique tag, even if the police can come and see the antique tag, well, it's got an active tag on it. There's no inspection or anything, so they don't know if it's a disabled vehicle. They don't know, if somebody's just not driving it right now. So requiring that instance to be at least parked on private property outside of the city right of way kind of eliminates that whole thing of them trying to be able to identify, broken down disabled vehicles and get those off the road. That's kind of the same thing with the tarp. We don't really have an issue with the tarp. It's with the tarp being used to accommodate disabled and broken down vehicles that are just there on the street and we can't do anything about them. So that's really the impetus for having the antique tag kind of rolled into this.
It would seem to me that since there is likely, among the folks with those vehicles, there's likely some sort of settled expectation that it must be okay, nobody's hassled me, I've had this car for 5 years, what's the problem? That I would hope that somebody would decide either at the court level or at the police officer level that maybe a warning is the first response.
Yeah, I mean,
Hand them a copy
I
of
would
the ordinance.
anticipate, no matter what we do with this, that there's gonna be warning period and, probably a 6 month of like, hey, we've noticed that your car, hasn't moved, or hey, you have a tarp on it, you can no longer do this in the city without just going out there and towing someone's vehicle in the middle of the night and them coming out and it's gone. So, I would think the anticipation would be that this would be a warning period of some sort.
And we could send out a notification to everybody that these rules are changing using the city newsletter also.
Well, I was just going to say, I had a lot of questions about all of this, and we talked about some of these issues and last time around, and the memo I thought was very helpful.
Yeah.
So I am inclined to basically trust the judgment of those who have done a lot more work on it than I have. My concerns, for the most part, have been allayed.
Can you explain the truck part of the email you sent?
Yeah, so our code adopts the state code definitions whenever there's a term that needs to be defined. The term truck is defined in the state code as not applying to pickup trucks. And so the question that I had, and I didn't spend more than 15 seconds looking at it, so I didn't do sort of a legal analysis. My question is, a dually is a pickup truck. It happens to be a pickup truck with extra wheels, but is it going to be governed by the more than 2 wheels per axle rule, or is it going to be governed by the pickup truck rule?
Well, I don't know that there is a pickup, there's nothing in the code that references truck or pickup truck. It's only the dually kind of aspect of that.
City code.
Right, the city
The
code.
city code uses the term truck occasionally, and the state code defines truck to exclude pickup trucks and panel trucks.
Okay.
But if we just add to it the dually requirement, then we can do that.
I think as long as somebody who has looked at it for longer than I have looks at it to say, we are clearly making this applicable to dualies whether they are pickups or panel trucks, that the dually aspect of it is what governs, then the judges, I'm sure, would say, thank you for making my job easier.
So you're referencing other parts of the code, not necessarily the parking?
I was
section of the
referencing
code?
the specific provisions here. And again, what I don't know, because I didn't, it was one of those things I was looking at it at way too late last night, and I wasn't going to spend a lot more time on it. But there are portions of these ordinances where they simply refer to trucks. The term truck gets used. And my point is simply that when we don't define truck anywhere in the city code, it is therefore that which is defined in the state code. And in the state code, it specifically exempts pickup trucks and panel trucks. And so whoever looks at this for the last time before it gets actually put into the code, maybe somebody in the city attorney's office working together with somebody in the police department, in the traffic division, who may have seen what the judges are actually doing in these cases. Maybe they could look at it and say, okay, we're gonna have a problem here, we gotta fix this, we gotta tweak it a little bit here, a little bit there.
I know the question had been posed to the city's attorney's office. I don't think we got a response back from them before council tonight, so.
So Lloyd, you support the not allowing RVs or trailers as well as the,
Well,
Where's the
RVs, as I recall,
so I'm looking at his list because I thought it was helpful. The boats and RVs, and then the trailers, you support not allowing
I'm trying to
this.
remember whether RV is defined any place.
Well, I think, I don't know. I think RVs, as far as what's material for this, for our purposes in the city, it seems like, you know, if you're out and you see something that looks like a recreational vehicle, that's what you'll deem it as. And then the other piece about whether it has 4 wheels and an axle is another thing that's very easy to tell, which is why I think that's a good break point for, you know, just practical purposes.
Brian, so I understand correctly, was your suggestion for trailers and RVs that they not be allowed if it's more than
Correct.
2 wheels per axle? And that's not currently how it's defined in what's in front of us right now?
Correct.
Okay. So if we just struck those two, the more than 2 wheels per axle would already encompass
Okay.
those uses. You wouldn't have to spell those out specifically. It would be
That's what I would
any
suggest.
use with more than, again, that's what's currently in the city code is, you know, vehicles or trailers with more than
Yeah, I mean,
2
so
wheels per
boats
axle.
would sit on a trailer, RVs, you know, have a chassis, and then trailers that could be used for businesses or whatever. You know, whether you want to include it, just to be more specific, that boats and RVs that have more than two wheels are excluded, and the same for trailers, just to sort of make it perfectly clear. But I guess your point is that that's captured earlier on when you say vehicles with more than.
Correct.
I would actually, I'm persuaded by your argument that boats are not necessary transportation needed within the city, and so we're subsidizing hobbies at the expense of overall parking needs. I find that persuasive for boats.
I can appreciate where you're coming from, Natalie, and the philosophical perspective you have on that, and I don't necessarily disagree with it, but I think that if a family wants to have a small RV or wants to have a small boat, and they've got space on the street, I don't know why we're penalizing people to use that really tiny piece of real estate to have their boat.
I guess there's nothing that precludes them from putting the boat in the driveway and their car on the street, and then that solves that issue.
Okay.
Michael?
If they have a driveway.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a similar, still in a similar place as last time. I would say, I would agree that for me, the biggest issue would be 6 and 7 in terms of if it could be clarified that boats and trailers, you know, aren't allowed only if it's more than 2 wheels per axle. To me, that seems the biggest issue. My concern is still the same, in that I just think this is not nearly targeted enough in terms of, I think what's needed is to have parking zones throughout the city where you can look at, you know, where are the areas where parking is extremely tight and where are the areas where that is just not the case. Informally walking around, you know, just this weekend, and this matches, you know, experience from the past. There are areas around me where people are parked with many of these activities, and just objectively, even during the holidays, there is ample open parking. And maybe that will change 15 years from now if there's substantial housing development there. But objectively, it's just not the case now. Other areas like downtown Belmont or near the downtown mall or areas near UVA, that's not the case at all. Parking is always strained, and I think it would make sense to apply all these things. But to unilaterally apply it throughout the city, I think, is for some pretty common uses, just a needless hassling and fining of people, which I don't think is wise. And if the argument is, well, enforcement won't look like that, I mean, what's to stop someone from just continually reporting a neighbor? Or it does sometimes happen that, you know, officers and patrols have gone through a neighborhood and ticketed for expired inspections in the past. I don't know how recently that's happened, but in the past it's occurred.
you know, if the argument is just, well, don't worry, it won't be enforced unreasonably, that doesn't seem like a good basis for applying a policy citywide. So that's still where I'm at, and I would concur that I think the worst one would be amending the boats, RVs, and trailer section with Councilor Pinkston's suggestion.
So do you support 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5?
1, I'm fine with. I think even just to do it across the city without zones, even 2, 3, 4, 5 just seem like needlessly providing a basis to fine and harass people.
I have two things for that. Last time we talked, I was a little more persuaded by your argument about outdated inspections, but I've thought about it since, and a car with an outdated inspection potentially is an unsafe car to operate. So that's not okay to be out in public usage. The other thing is we have this culture of cars, and people have this kind of unwritten expectation that the public right-of-way in front of their house belongs to them as their parking area. And that's not the case. Even a couple months ago, my dad went for lunch at Riverside and parked on the street, and when he got back to his car, the neighbor had left a note on his windshield that said, "This is my parking spot. Don't park here again." No, that is city space. And so that's the kind of like culture that we're in, and the mental default that people have that this is going to be part of the cultural shift to shake that up for folks. Your boat on public space is not a public good. So I'm not that concerned that we have to provide a space for people to keep their boats.
And I guess just, you know, my final argument would be, and I think this applies in other areas of the city, but it also doesn't apply. There are other areas which it doesn't apply. But, you know, just walking around in the area of southern Belmont this weekend is an area where there are duplexes and triplexes that, you know, were single-family homes that have one small driveway for one vehicle. Mm-hmm. Everyone else who lives there parks on the street. There's the mobile home park in that area, and just informally, there were multiple vehicles fitting some of these descriptions, not all of them, but some of them. Even on Nassau Street, there were people who have informal body shop businesses that would violate this sometimes. But that entire area, objectively, there's no shortage of parking. But you do have a lot of people living in a house where there's only space for one vehicle in the driveway. The other people who live there do have cars, so no matter what, you know, 2 out of the 3 residents there are parking on the street currently. And again, there's no shortage of parking, and there's also no permitted parking. I just don't think it makes sense for people in that context, for something they've been doing for years, to start providing a basis to hassle and fine them. Meanwhile, in other areas like downtown Belmont or areas near UVA where there is constant parking pressure, I do think doing all this would make sense because there's an urgent need to do it, because parking is strained. So that's where I'm at. I understand, you know, others may not be persuaded, but that's where I am.
So I know that we said that we didn't hear anything from the police.
Yes, we did. I was going to offer that before you attempted to vote on the matter. I did follow up on the question that was posed, and I knew that you all were going to probably still want to talk about it, as you just did. I would ask that you postpone this until the next meeting. Both the chief and the Commonwealth's attorney have opinions, probably, based on what I'm hearing, that they would like to look at this and just confirm that they're satisfied with the enforcement ability of this. And if that would require a couple of edits, then they would work with Brennan to do so.
Yeah, I would definitely support that.
Is this something that we open for a public hearing?
Didn't we already do that? I don't remember.
Did we do a
I don't
public
think
hearing on
it's
this?
required.
I don't think
It was
we
just,
required
no, it was
one.
just the two readings.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, would it make sense, Mayor, to just do a straw poll? I mean, it sounds like 2 of us aren't really supportive of, you know, portions of this at least, and 3 of us
Well,
would be supportive of it, assuming the police and the,
well, that's it. I mean, that could be a big part of it. And so I don't want to poll based on insufficient information. So I'll poll to see if we'll defer this.
There are two components that came out of the conversation, brief conversation. I didn't get to go in deep into this, was about the definition of truck. That is a question. And the tarp is a matter of question because it is, I guess, our practice on not bothering a tarp is based on long-standing opinion. And I don't know that that's been updated in the perspective. So I think.
yeah, I thought that,
That was the main reason for adding that in here, is so
Yeah.
that it was, because right now it's not illegal to have a tarp, so there's no reason. So that had been talked about with.
I mean, and that seems like a
police already.
no-brainer that we should do that. I mean, if.
So let's get the opinion from the police
And it's just to ensure the
Yeah.
enforceability. It's not a judgment on whether or not the right content is there. It's that they then feel as though that they have the enforcement ability that would fall to them. That's really what it's about.
And if I could add to the things I'd like to have somebody take a look at, is to think about how we have defined or how we want to be defining recreational vehicle, because it does not appear to be defined in the state code or in the city code. In the state code, it says manufactured home does not include a park model recreational vehicle, which is a vehicle that, and it goes on and lists some criteria. And I would just like to have somebody who has some sensibility about legislative drafting to take a look at that, to say, is there something we need to say in there that makes it just absolutely clear what we're talking about? I think the 40-foot long recreational vehicles that are, practically 2 stories high.
Well, that's where the dually thing helps, because I think when you move from a 2-wheel axle to 4-wheel, you're moving up
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, that's a step change. I mean, a little pop-up camper that someone has in front of their house, I don't know why we care that, I mean.
By the way, pop-up camper is also separately, camping trailer is separately defined.
Okay.
So, I mean, the point is, it would be great, I think, if Commonwealth's attorney and chief of police sort of looked at it in gross.
And maybe there's like a glossary.
Definition, we can add it to
Yeah.
the definitions section of the code if we need to.
Something.
Are there any, I know you guys have talked about possibly removing or amending some of these, like, are there any of these uses that if we're not voting on it tonight, we're coming back? Are there any of those uses that you would like us to go ahead and take out? Is there consensus on that? Or do we want to leave it until the vote?
I think it's
and you
going to
guys
come
can-
down to a 2-3 vote. I mean, it sounds like to me.
Consensus.
Yeah, again, I don't know if there's others, but I would concur with Brian's suggestions about items 6 and 7, just making that more than 2 wheels per axis.
Would you be willing to go along with the rest of it?
I think those are the worst parts of it. I still wouldn't be happy about the others, but I could live with the rest of it. But I think
Okay.
those are the biggest.
So you'd be willing to go along with assuming we get through the legal if we tweak the language around 6 and 7 to make it clear that anything 4 wheels or more was not acceptable?
I think so, yes.
So that way we would get
Yeah.
all 5 people voting for it.
I think it's probably going to be a good way to look at it.
Me, personally, my venture into this mainly was to address those vehicles that have been tarped for a long time. I mean, we may have some issues with some other things, but that's not, I don't hear complaints about those as much. But it's going to come back to us, and even if it takes more, is this an urgent matter? I mean, it can come back on the 16th, but if it's.
I mean, we've been dealing with it for the 10 years I've been here, so this is not necessarily urgent.
Yeah, and I think a little more information about enforcement and how it has been enforced. I don't, like the image you showed last time of 3 cars that look like they've been there since time immemorial. It would seem like there was some other standard or rule we could have applied to say, look, this has been sitting here forever, it's unsightly. There's no way to do that?
The information that I've gotten from the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, the police have tried and looked and dug, and those were not there.
I see.
The mechanism was not there for us to.
But definitely
do
we need
anything
that
about
for sure.
Yeah.
And it sounds like we'll get it, but I am definitely interested in an honest opinion from the chief, just at a practical level, what does employment look like in terms of feasibility, time, resources, and
Yeah.
He'll be ready.
Yeah.
He's watching.
Yeah. Okay, any other comments on this for now? It'll be back. Okay. The next item is.
I think there needs to be a vote to.
I would move to
Oh,
defer to the next meeting.
Second.
Okay, can we vote? That item is, will be deferred to, a future meeting. Will you amend that just in case, Michael, so that, if they need more time?
Yes.
Thank you. So the next item is, the smart scale the reallocation and cancellation and project development agreement, so.
All right, good evening, Mayor Wade, members of council. My name is James Freese, Deputy City Manager for Operations. All right. So the city's transportation program includes 34 total projects valued at $185 million. With our new project management and leadership structure, staff is continuously evaluating the portfolio relative to available funding, pricing, schedule, and staff capacity. As a result, and as we discussed previously on November 4th, we are bringing forward tonight a resolution supporting canceling the Emmett Street Phase 2 project and the Fifth and Ridge project, as well as authorizing VDOT administration of the Fontaine Avenue project, consistent with the MOA that was adopted by council back this past July. I want to note, staff has been working very, very closely with our local VDOT district office to arrive at this recommendation. So I have a number of slides. You've seen these before that go into detail about each one of these projects. I'm starting with Fontaine. This is the project that would be administered by VDOT following this, the resolution this evening. This project began back in 2016. The original project included a 3-lane roadway with 10 to 12 foot wide median strips where those fit, as well as some dedicated left turn lanes, 5-foot sidewalk, 6-foot landscape and tree buffer, 6-foot curb, and 5-foot bike lanes on both sides of the street. The cost estimate for that original project came to $32 million, which was at that time $18 million over budget. So you can see here that we worked closely, both staff in the city, working with our counterparts at the VDOT district office, came to a revised scope for this project with a revised estimate of $24,940,000. So we still, at the end of that, had just over a $7 million shortfall. Significantly, the reason this project, we were able to bring this project down in cost was by moving this project primarily within the existing right-of-way and reducing the degree of retaining walls necessary. So here's the original cross-section. This is not a portion that had medians within it. It's just the narrow portion of the project. But again, you can see very wide sidewalks, bicycle lanes on both sides of the street. So in many ways, an ideal scenario. The revised cross-section has a shared use path on one side of the street and the 2 travel lanes and a sidewalk on the other side of the street.
And is that shared use path is protected? That 1 foot of buffer is
Yes, it is.
protection, not just paint?
Right, not just paint. That is curb. Yep. I should note, Brendan is here with me as well, Brendan Duncan, city engineer, to help answer any questions that might come up. So, and then we have Emmett Street Phase 2, Emmett Streetscape Phase 2. This is one of the projects we're proposing to cancel. The note here about this project is, like both projects that we're proposing to cancel, one of the reasons we're proposing these projects for cancellation is because no work has begun on these projects. We don't owe any money back to VDOT if we choose to cancel these projects.
And for this, Is it all of the projects that if we cancel them, we could reallocate them to other projects, or just how does that work? Again?
So that's a really important point. And so I want to emphasize that Smart Scale, the VDOT funding program, these aren't lines of credit with VDOT. Each one is an individual application to VDOT, granting us funds to pursue a specific project with a specific set of outcomes, which were the basis for our application. The ability to move funds between projects is something that is being given to the city in this instance in recognition for the significant improvements we've made to our program and the recognition of the close working relationship we have with VDOT today. It's not something that would typically be available to us, and it should be noted also that our score remains very low, kind of where we are today. While there's a great deal of recognition of improvement and partnership with VDOT, our score is still reflective of the fact that we haven't delivered any projects on time or otherwise. I should say we've delivered Belmont at this point, but projects on time. And that is reflective of our score. And we've done prior presentations that have shown the dashboard that VDOT uses when they're making decisions about programs. Our score remains the same. But our relationship has improved considerably, and that has put us in the position today where we're not talking about canceling this full slate of projects, or we're not talking about having to identify millions of dollars of city funds to make up the differences on these projects that we're keeping. What we have is the potential to move forward and shift funding within these projects. So the second project we're proposing to cancel is the 5th Street and Ridge project. We've dug into the reasons why this project is eligible to be, is an appropriate one to cancel. But again, it's one that we have not spent any money on to date. There's been no work done on this project. I'll note that you'll see here a revised, the previous estimate shows a revised number. We were previously showing $29 million, which was a number that we did get reported to us by VDOT, but we checked back with VDOT and had this corrected. The funding available for this project is in fact $14,841,000.
So if you go back to that, please.
Yep.
So 5th Street and Ridge. So we've not done a revised estimate for that. So that 14.8 is probably $10 million low.
Easily $10 million low. I suspect potentially even more than that. This is a project that I think is quite a complicated project, given all the different pieces of it, and it's the extended length of it. It's thought you triggered another thought, and then it went out of my head. I apologize.
No problem. Happens to me all the time.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you. I'll come back to it if it comes to me. Emmett Streetscape project. This is a project that we worked on, that we have jointly worked on with UVA. It should be noted UVA is contributing money towards making up the shortfall in this project. But even with that, the shortfall comes to $5,200,000 approximately. Let me know if you all want to dig into any of these projects in terms of the specifics of the proposed project.
And
yep.
Sorry, just to go back. So how much will UVA be contributing to this one? And then again, how much of the canceled projects are being reallocated to this one for this shortfall? I guess I'm trying to figure out what's the mix of UVA and other money covering this shortfall.
So UVA's total contribution was $5 million into these projects. It's been proposed as half of that would go to this project and half would go to Fontaine, but where we are but we're still left, the $5,284,000 number that you see there is still entirely what we need to make up from the other projects.
Did you have?
No, it's
Oh.
it's just a spelling error.
Oh, what?
What?
The last one, Emmett, was spelled correctly. The one we're canceling, Emmett, was
Oh.
misspelled. It doesn't matter. We're canceling it. No.
We'll take down the street
Sorry.
signs.
Is it Tooties? It's Tooties, right?
Yeah.
It's one?
Two M's.
Sorry. I've been going on that
Sorry.
street for 20 years.
I looked weird. I had to double check. Sorry. I
No worries. East High Streetscape Project. This project continues the work from the Belmont Bridge. Has a shortfall, estimated shortfall of $5,400,000. And then we have the Barracks Road Emmett Street project with a revised scope. In this case, even with when we revised the scope to bring us into the right-of-way and reduce the degree of retaining walls necessary, we don't end up with a shortfall. We actually end up with some money left, but we believe it's appropriate to retain that money in that account in case there are future shortfalls associated with this project, especially given that there can be uncertainties in the acquisition of right-of-way. So this, actually, I'm good. Any questions on this project?
We've seen these.
Yeah.
Yes, you have. Here's the original scope for the project and the revised scope. And I'm happy to take any further questions there might be on these.
And before you do that, I feel compelled to share a few thoughts myself on this matter, since I've been dealing with this personally for 3 years. I just want to offer additional clarity for the benefit of council and the public as it relates to what has not been an easy process and what has not been an easy decision and or recommendation to bring to you. And really hoping that we can express enough to the public at large that we did not arrive at this conclusion very easily. This is not with a lack of thought and consideration to be at this point. But just to run through a quick timeline with you, because as I thought about, okay, what am I going to say about this? Because I'm not going to just not say something about it. In August of 2021, that's 30 days after I arrived here, I was summoned to VDOT. And in that conversation with VDOT, I was told that the city of Charlottesville was not performing as it related to the management of our locally administered program. And that started what has been a 3-year saga. It's probably safe to describe it as that for those who've been involved in this. And again, not spending a whole lot of time on the blame game and all of that. We've been through enough of that conversation. I repeatedly came back to this council, also to the Planning Commission. In May of '22, I came and asked for additional capacity for the engineering division because we were not fully staffed the way we needed to be able to deliver what we had agreed to do. In November of '22, I remember distinctly speaking to the Planning Commission, asking them not to give me any additional money for projects because I don't need the money. That wasn't my problem. There was a need to reimagine and re-envision some of how we were going about doing the work that needed to be done. Plus, I needed to really fill the seats that we did not have and try to bring about the revision to process, procedure, and even philosophy in some cases. In August of '23, the Commonwealth Transportation Board adopted a new performance management program where they identified that, one, we are not unique in the challenges of managing our own program. And across the state, they have one municipality after the other that's struggling, big and small. So we are not special. We are just like everybody else having some difficulty in being able to manage this. And in all of that, I offer this to say that, again, we are not here asking for cancellations and revisions, taking it lightly. It is not a good place to be. Nobody wanted to do this. I probably pushed the issue more so than anybody. And I'll say that, as James has mentioned, that a lot of where we are is the result of relationship building. Like literally, we are here still driving this bus, making these recommendations to you because we were on the verge of losing that ability. That's what I want people to not miss in this moment. that it's fair for people to be disappointed that we've had to make changes. It is fair to be angry that we are canceling projects because we have already allowed you to wait so long thinking you were going to get them, and now we're telling them you're not going to get them. I appreciate that. But the reality of this is still about retaining local control, because that is very important, and actually just fixing the things that we know that we needed to fix. Some of it, we just need a little more time. The point that James has made about, even with all that we have laid out for you, in January, when the final decision is made by the CTB, and we expect that they're going to be in favor of, and we pray and hope that they are, I'm going to be deeply disappointed if they don't, our score still does not change with that action. So we're not out of the woods. We still have real work that needs to be done. This is about setting us up for success, because what we have allowed to happen, and it's just what has happened, our portfolio has been too big, too complicated, and we did not have the right size team appropriately situated to deliver. That's the fact. And with all of that, I accept it all. I think the team has really embraced the notion that it's no one's fault, it is where we are, and we need to move forward. And the best way to do that is to right size this portfolio for our ability to deliver it. And that's really why we're where we are. So just stating the facts for what they are. Take no issue with people being disappointed. I am disappointed, but I also know that VDOT has been a great partner in this conversation. And if we had not really put in the work, we would have had projects pulled from us and canceled for us.
Yeah, this is more like taking control of our own destiny versus it being handed to us.
Absolutely.
So, and I've, you've spoken to us a number of times about this whole situation, and I want to applaud your team for trying to, put together what is manageable. It seems to me like our eyes were bigger than our stomach for quite a long time, and that a number of these cost estimates were just, maybe fanciful is not the right word, but they were done in a pre-COVID timeframe, I guess, and the numbers are coming in 50%, 100% greater. So it's just a very different world than when many of these were conceived.
Yeah. We would have never been able to climb out of this without extraordinary measures. So that's where we are. That's the truth.
Other questions or comments we've seen is, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate all that, and I think that's definitely true. I mean, for the community, I mean, these projects over budget, some of them because they were funded in 2016, and a lot has changed since 2016, and probably because of 6 and 7 years straight of high-level staff turnover, not enough staff, wrong approach towards managing projects that were funded in 2016 just still didn't get completed. And moving in this direction is all about changing that and getting us to the point where that is not the case anymore, and we are able to apply for new smart scale projects. So I agree 100% with all that. I do have one question coming in. One of the things I heard that, I think I didn't realize is just that in terms of reapplying for these, we're unlikely to be successful because the scoring criteria has changed. So we should assume that at least similar projects are unlikely to get funded again just because VDOT currently won't score it the same way. And in that context, is it accurate that with the $14.8 million, if that were reallocated, if you cut Fifth and Ridge and reallocated it to the others without cutting everything, would the overrun be $2.8 million to not cut the Emmett Street Phase 2?
So there's two factors there. You would, first off, we don't have any engineering work to date on Emmett Phase 2, so we don't even have anything to base current estimates as what that project would cost today. So you can anticipate some level of overrun on that project. Now, theoretically, perhaps you could value engineer that down as well. But the more important point here is the one we've been trying to make, that while we have a very close working relationship with VDOT, VDOT has, I'm going to say, just made it clear that we're not, this is the deal. This is what we're moving forward with.
So, I mean, to that question of if the city had just put $2.8 million in the CIP, we could have completed Emmett Phase that we're cutting. Is that not accurate?
In terms of math, yeah. But in terms of actually getting agreement to take that course, probably not.
There are other barriers beyond just
And
the
it sounds like
funding.
the cost estimates, I mean, that's assuming original cost estimates versus if you don't have any drawings to go out and actually.
Right. So the cost estimates.
Could be
leaving that
10
aside,
times that
it-
much.
It could be a much more substantial, so there's a big unknown there, right, of how much the additional cost is, and the additional, and then, to value engineer it into something that maybe fits within that old budget or is closer to it, and we're making up a number, that's an additional cost in terms of engineering and that work. So there's a bunch of unknowns associated with that, but I'm trying to say it without kind of casting dispersions on our partner in VDOT. VDOT has made it clear, like, the deal is what the deal is. They were strongly discouraging of us keeping these two projects that had not yet begun. From their perspective, it was a strong benefit to move forward with us focusing on the projects that had already been begun and not trying to begin these two additional projects.
I think that's a critical contextual point. There has been no movement, none.
And they're not, their funding is somewhat contingent on a timeline. Is that an
Well,
accurate
all
thing
of
to
this
say?
pro-
Like, we couldn't say, okay, we're gonna cancel Fifth Street, we're still TBD on Emmett Phase 2, hang out there for a little bit while we get the other stuff done.
But if you're questioning our performance, why give us another project to touch?
Well, I guess I'm saying, is
You're
that?
agreeing is what you're.
Well, I'm just asking if that's the conversation that was had, where they're saying, we're not gonna give you forever on Emmett Phase 2, and you're not gonna get to it in time, so you might as well cancel it. Is that kind of
No,
how
I think part of it was buying into the idea of what are you all really capable of delivering on with where you are at this point in time? And again, wanting to continue to remind you that VDOT district office has gone to bat for us and secured the ability for some flexibility in the movement of money that is unheard of. It is now actually being used as a tactic for helping other locally administered programs get done, so we are now a model for how to reform. That's a good thing, too. But the options that we assume are there are not really there. That's really what I'm trying to drive home.
Yeah, and I just want to distill it down for the community.
Yes,
So
I
it
get
sounds
that.
like, the situation is when this began, the default was all of these getting cut because there was no faith in our ability to complete projects on time. That evolved into keeping some of them, but our only constraint is not just money. It is VDOT's conditions and their trust in our ability to demonstrate completing on time, even when we get funding.
Right, and they're managing a statewide portfolio that has challenges. So that's the other part that has to be factored in. We're just one community with issues. When I speak of what could have been taken away, just simply canceled, anything that we had not moved on was game for being taken away. So we were actually at least allowed to rethink our approach to the portfolio, and that gave them the ability to say, well, maybe we could go to bat for you on keeping that money within your local program, just use it differently. Yes, you cancel a project in order to make that happen, but that gives us the best possibility for us delivering on what remains as our portfolio.
Other questions on this? So we had discussed this before, but we thought it would be good to have this kind of public discussion of it. So I think that it is good because it is, projects that impact the entire community. Probably everyone travels on these roads at some point. So I'm glad we're able to discuss it publicly. But it is where we are now, and these are things that we have the ability now to address because we in the effort of moving the city forward. So,
I'm sorry, I have one small question.
yeah.
This is not a derailing your conclusion. But once these, like hang on, let me find the right one. The intersection at the Barracks Road Emmett Street project, like we have the rendering of it now. How, 100% accurate is that rendering versus what's gonna happen, or how much shifting and wiggling will there actually be before it's built?
That's a question I'm going to defer to our city engineer on.
So the intersection itself is not changing with the revised scope. It's really just that bike lane kind of getting.
You mean the proposed intersection?
Of Barracks and Emmett?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The proposal for the intersection is not changing.
Correct. Yes,
Yeah,
sorry.
okay.
The design, the revised design for that does not touch what was planned for the intersection itself. So those improvements remain as they were originally planned
Yeah,
in
and my
the
question is
scope.
really like throughout the process of, from this initial phase to when it actually gets built, how much, like, is that what's gonna get built, or are there still some TBD things to figure out?
We're pretty close. We were already at close to 70-80% design plans. We've had to go back and revise those to accommodate the revised scope, but we're still kind of right there. So we're moving forward with right-of-way and then towards the design. There has been talks about doing one more public meeting to kind of show what we're actually doing with this revised scope, because it's not what was kind of talked about and promised to the public. So we do want to at least go through that and walk through it with the public so they're aware of what the changes are and what's happening with it. But we're kind of locked into the design.
I'm going to state that affirmatively. There'll be a public meeting for each of the projects that have a revised scope. So
Okay, that's
Fontaine
good.
and Barracks Yard.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this? You have any?
No, I just want to note that there is a resolution on this item. The resolution cancels the previous project
Right.
development agreement that was authorized by council. It itemizes each one of these items, the cancellation, yeah, of those two projects.
Cancellation.
Cancellation, thank you.
I like cancelization.
Yeah, thank you. Rolls better, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
The cancel of both of those projects, and then the authorization for Fontaine to be administered by VDOT, which understand that the reason for that is primarily because, or one of the reasons for that is that VDOT is also doing a project at the interchange with 64, and so they're going to be able to do that. We'll actually save money by that being done as one project across that entire length.
So I would move this resolution authorizing changes to or cancellation of various state-funded transportation projects locally administered by the city of Charlottesville. The details are in the packet.
Second.
Can we please vote? Thank you. The motion passes 5-0. The next item is resolution for revisions to the Architecture Design Control District. Is Jeff Warner?
No,
Oh,
James.
James, okay.
He forgot.
He's go get his other notebook.
Have to switch hats.
Yeah.
I think the main thing to note on this item is that we received some comments back based on y'all's conversation last time on the cafe spaces. We would certainly welcome additional conversation on this item. We understand that it may be not fully baked at this point. So I think tonight we're actually asking for a deferral, but we want to extend an invitation to any counselor who would like to meet with staff and kind of dig into the specific provisions of those guidelines.
So,
yeah.
Councilor Oshern, you did an amazing job here you sent us out, your notes and thoughts on this. I guess I would like some time to work through this. And one thing I will say, and I've tried to think about, sort of our role in this. I think there are it's like we were talking about with the boats in front of people's yards, a little bit of a philosophical, preference or whatever. I think to some degree, how much control we let people have or how free we feel about that is, maybe preference is not the right word, but a different value judgment that we may make. I tend to have a lot of confidence in the BAR, and I feel like, the burden of proof would be on me to sort of come up with something different than what they recommended. I do know that, the sort of mindset of the BAR, at least the folks that I've talked to there, really is more of a, maybe bare bones is not the right word, but like a purist sort of view of the mall and its history, and trying to reflect the original intent of the design, and with that sort of a scaffolding, and then people can build elements around that. So I think there's a little bit of a, I don't know, just a different sort of starting point that they might have versus, for example, some of the comments that you made 2 weeks ago. So I'll be interested in reading what you've got here, and maybe we can talk some more about it.
And I'm happy, just if I could just speak to that for a moment. So the BAR is charged with issuing these guidelines for the cafe spaces, or making a recommendation, I should say, on these guidelines for these recommendations for council adoption, and supposed to be updating these on a regular basis. From my conversations with Mr. Warner, the primary intention of these regulations is kind of both practical and historic preservation, right? Because the BAR fundamentally is charged with the task of historic preservation, and the mall itself is a recognized historic landscape. Both, I believe it's both state and federally recognized in that regard. So from a practical perspective, we recognize that all of it is public space. The entire mall is public space, and therefore we are essentially the landlords of this space and need to be able to move or change things on a kind of easy and simple basis, if need be, right? If the need arises that we need to be able to make an alteration to a cafe space for whatever reason, we need to be able to do so. So that's the practical side. And then the historic preservation side is just a recognition that the BAR is charged with attempting to use a set of standards that recognize the original design intent of the mall. So one of the primary kind of design ideas of the mall is that it was meant to be kind of an open forest landscape, if you will, with a brick forest floor and trees, but it was meant to be open. The trees, remember in the original design, the bricks came right up to the trunks of the trees, and it was supposed to present this image of kind of an open gathering space beneath the trees. Cafe spaces were not an original part of that, but I think the BAR and the community has largely adapted to and recognized the value of those cafe spaces, even if we struggle in some of the details of how they lay out. So this current set of guidelines are trying to recognize that feel of what the mall was supposed to present while allowing the cafe spaces to exist. So that's the whole genesis of it. And one of the points that Jeff made that should be recognized also is that in this iteration of the design guidelines, they actually reduced the level of requirements on the cafe spaces
versus
what it was previously. So they have already lightened up. Now, it's fully within the prerogative of council to say we have higher values than the historic preservation values that the BAR is attempting to recognize for other reasons with regard to, say, the economic vitality of the mall itself.
One question I had
factors.
was, so the appeal process, so say we were to adopt the BAR recommendations as they've given us, and someone says, I want to do something different.
Yep.
There's a $125 fee to appeal, and then it comes to us to decide?
I think that's the number. I honestly don't remember off the top of my head, but yes, so the way it goes is, so if I want to do something outside of the guidelines, I have the option to go to the BAR on a case-by-case basis. The BAR might then approve it, or if the BAR does not approve it, then that decision can then be appealed to the city council.
I mean, what would be the practical impact if we just waived that fee? If we said, I mean, you can't just be anybody, but if you're renting a space or whatever, and we had we adopted the BAR's guidelines, and then someone said, hey, I want to do something slightly different. And they met with staff, with Jeff, and Jeff was like, well, that doesn't really meet the guidelines. You need to talk to the BAR. I mean, the $125, I guess, I mean, that's not nearly paying for anyone's time who's involved in this. I mean, I'm assuming it's like to prevent nuisance applications or something?
Yeah, oftentimes that's what that kind of a fee is in place for, right? But, I mean,
if you were to set it up such that only a person with, I guess the legal term would be standing, a person that is renting a space or whatever could make the appeal. Would that help somewhat? I mean, in terms of like, there's a lot of flexibility here for people to propose things, but the basic sort of scaffolding or framework we have is this.
Yeah, there's any number of ways you could cut that. You could, and I'm going off the top of my head without consulting with anybody, obviously. But you could argue that our leaseholders, the cafe spaces, are already paying a cafe fee and subject to our rules and requirements, and that therefore we decide to make the appeal process, waive the fee for that appeal process. We could build it in somehow.
I would think that might be a good idea.
And as a practical timeline question, the goal for getting these in front of us at this point was because the leases will renew in January, so the goal was to update these before they're renewed?
I thought it was
That's
March.
correct. I don't know exactly when, but it comes up early in the new year.
Okay, so maybe not January.
I think it may be in March.
I think it's
Don't quote me,
March.
but I think we send the notice in January to remind folks that they've got a process, they got to renew.
I'd like to say just a couple of things. I know I sent this out to everybody earlier today, so that's why we haven't gotten a lot of time to review it. But just a couple of things I wanted to highlight in the memo. The adjustments I made are not, there's not a bunch of them. They're not, they're just kind of loosening a couple things. And then a couple of questions that are just like, there is something that the BAR recommended, and I'm just wondering if is that really a concern that we have, or is it not?
I don't understand
And-
your question.
Well, I'm just giving some background to the chart that I gave over. So like one of the questions I have is, so there's a picture I included of the Citizen Burger thing, and one of the BAR recommendations is no solid panels except for where there already is one, and so Citizen Burger has one, so it's an example of that, and it's like, is that really something we care? Is it fine? Like if we're allowing that there, is that just something to consider? But then also I included some photos from some older ones. There's definitely, the trees are young, and then some recent ones as well, including one where the trees are quite young, and it's looking west, kind of where City Space is. And then there's, some trees and there's people sitting there, and I know this is a snapshot in time. But then I have another photo from the other direction that's much more recent, and the big difference is there's a lot more people in the recent photo because there's a cafe space where there wasn't any before. And I know that cafe spaces are, you have to pay to use them, so it's not mutually exclusive to also have public seating, but they bring vibrancy and tax dollars and something to do to what was previously an empty space. And so that's just another thing to consider. The third thing I want to point out is the cohesiveness of the mall is pretty evident in just the brick of the floor. That ties the space together, I think, more than, multicolored umbrellas ever could disrupt. So, so I think that lays a very strong foundation for the defining the space of the mall, and also knowing that it's a historic area because that's a traditionally historic material. So just some things to think about while we review these suggestions.
Thank you.
And again, I haven't had a chance to review the suggestions. Like last time, quite frankly, I would be prepared to vote to support the design review guidelines as presented to us from the BAR. I think the old regulations, all the growth in creativity we've seen on the mall was possible within those regulations, and these are even looser than those, and I think do provide flexibility, both in some of the guidelines, but also in always being able to go to a review process. So I think, to me, there's enough flexibility while also preventing, a scenario where the mall became defined by corporate branding. which to me seems like really the ultimate goal of avoiding standardized corporate branding throughout the mall. And I haven't had the chance to review the specific changes. I wouldn't be interested in, upending everything they sent us. I'm not sure how much better of a product we would get. I am satisfied with what the BAR gave us, although I'm sure there's some specific things, I wouldn't mind changed, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and I would say the suggestions aren't upending nor fostering a more corporate environment.
Other questions or comments? This is going to come back after. What meeting, Sam?
That would be dependent on your ability to reach some sort of consensus so that we're not
So
still
we have something to present. at the
trying
next
to
meeting.
determine which of the line items are okay or not. So
Yeah, so-
I think just a reminder of what James has indicated, the ability for you all to engage staff, NDS staff specifically, that extension, that offer has been made, that would be helpful to just understand where you are, where you would define, this is a sword that I'm willing to fall on. That might be helpful if we could figure out what those are, and then be able to find out how everyone feels about it to finalize what the actual item is that we bring back to you.
I would. It's not the end of the world, but ideally, I would like to have us finalize whatever we finalize before the notices start to go out to the leaseholders. I don't know when that is, but whenever it is.
I think we would need to do so on the 16th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's set that
Yeah.
goal. So
Need
if
a
everyone could take a look
Yeah.
by
I-
next meeting, that'd be great.
I would move to defer the resolution to our next council meeting on December 16th.
Second?
Okay, can we vote? This item is deferred until the December 16th. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So if the game plan is to review your memo, and if we have specific questions, we can get with James and staff to, is that?
If you're interested in the conversation with NDS staff, we would just need to know that so that that
Yeah.
can be arranged. If you don't feel as though you need to deliberate there, you just want to settle up on what your positions are, just let me know.
Yeah.
And that in itself helps us know if we're ready to bring it back or what to bring back.
And just so we're clear on our guidelines and what constitutes acceptable discussion via email and commenting on a live document, because in this chart, you can right-click and leave a comment, so you can make a note and not actually change what's presented. We can do that, and then because it's FOIA-able, it's technically accessible
That's
to
true.
everybody.
Yeah, if you do that and I get access to it, then we can read that and determine what we think we learned from you. That'd be helpful.
Yeah, if anything, yeah.
I
And
would
if-
hope that
I'm
you
sure
would
you'll
tell us
learn a
what we
lot.
did.
And if
So we can
anybody
bring it back.
somehow doesn't, I made it so that anyone in the city has access to this
Yeah.
chart. If you don't, and then just send a request and I'll figure out how
Cool.
to approve it.
Cool.
Okay, so we're, oh, I'm sorry.
I think
No,
they're,
I just had a question about the, using the document in that way, and I think we would need some city attorney input on that.
Okay.
Just
On making it accessible, if we do get FOIA requests, it's going to be a moment in time.
yeah,
So,
that's true, because at any point, it changes.
Right,
because
which is why I'm
anyone could go in and
suggesting
do
leave
that.
a comment instead of
Yeah.
change anything. Or just send an email asking. to change.
Well, I think the assumption, we all know that it's voidable.
Yeah.
So any edits to it means that the document is changed. So if anyone were to say, I would like to see what council is discussing on this matter, today is one answer, tomorrow could be a different answer because there could be added items.
We can add as many tabs as we
Yeah.
need.
But I
Yeah.
think that the FOIA issue is that if we're doing it in this fashion, it becomes a meeting in essence. And if it's going to be a meeting, it's got to be noticed.
Is that your
Right.
concern, Ms. Thomas?
I think that's what we need clarity on.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm
My concern is that
asking.
we get an abundance of FOIA requests anyway, so a document that could possibly change over a matter of time could get lots of requests.
I guess the question is there a way we can make the document itself available for anybody to read, but not necessarily only some of us to change, so that you don't have to treat it as a FOIA request? It's treated like an ongoing meeting that people can wander in and out of.
Well, I mean, would it work to just PDF it and say, this is where we are right now? And then we can each read it?
Because it's a network, like it's on OneDrive, each version is saved.
I realize that. I'm
Yeah.
just saying, to get around these questions, maybe we just PDF it into stone for right now and say, this is where we're starting from, and then we can have conversations and follow up.
Okay, yeah, so I
And then-
sent that PDF and we can
Okay.
just use that. The one thing that the PDF doesn't have are the photos that I attached.
So maybe if you could include those, and then, do you need those for the meeting minutes or something, Ms. Thomas?
I need it to provide to the public as an attachment to this meeting agenda, since it was discussed.
If we could, our city attorney representative for Sands Anderson, Pamela Berry, is on. Let's let her weigh in. Remy, do you see Pam as a panelist?
Good evening. Yes, I'm here.
So Pam, what I would like to have you respond to specifically is the question of if council is sharing a document that is receiving any commentary over a period of time, would that be a concern for FOIA?
Every version of the document that is a record, meaning as it progresses, every minute that it is a record, the state that it exists in at the time it is requested is what must be provided under FOIA. So if there are versions of it that are saved, each one of those versions that are saved is a record. But if it's one continually changing document and the prior versions no longer exist when it's changed, then the version that exists at the time the request is made is what is FOIA-able.
If it's think of it's a OneDrive or like a same thing as a Google Doc, which means each version is continuously saved inside of itself, but not saved as a separate file. So the entire history is accessible. How does that affect that?
I think that's what she's saying.
Yes, then the entire history that exists, every record every version of it that exists, assuming that the request is for every document that exists related to the subject, then every version of it that is a record that exists is a responsive FOIA document.
So would it be better to just kind of email like a list of, for example, if there was a list of thoughts about things to change on something, like email just one document that's a list and then we respond, here's what we think about the list you gave, as opposed to like a living document? Or I'm just confused, like if it's, what's cleaner for?
I'm assuming it would probably be easier for our FOIA officer if it was emails versus downloading every version of a live document.
Ms. O'Berry, I think
What
what
would
you,
be- I'm sorry.
I think what you said earlier was that the second option was that what is recordable and FOIA-able is what exists
at that time.
At that time. In the way
At the time of the request, that's right. If it
And
is a
so-
living, breathing, changing document, and
Right, so if
every
you had-
version of it is not retained, it's just kind of a
Yeah.
living, changing document.
But
then
not
what
really. I mean,
Yeah, because you click version history and then you can go back to each time there was an edit and click on that, and that becomes a live version of the document.
I understand, but I think even that, at a given time, you could just.
So is there easy?
So let's just email.
I would say the easiest, if we're thinking of the FOIA officer, what would work best for them is to have conversations and not put everything, all these changes in a living document.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
I think that this can get complicated and doesn't have to be, because it highly likely, particularly now, we'll get FOIA'd and then we won't have the right version, and then they're going to say we're trying to hold it. So it's going to be just the opposite of what we're trying to do. So I would definitely say let's have those conversations instead of trying to do this via email.
Or via document.
Via document.
Well,
It's
could you
just-
take, maybe you've already done this, what you have, could you could you PDF it? Have you already done
I'll
it?
send out a complete version with both tabs and the photos
So
attached.
then we've got
so
that
it's a
that we can
single-
call you and talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was all excited to have a collaborative,
Yeah, yeah.
networked document, but we'll change, I'll revert
Yeah.
to the old school.
It'll make it a lot easier when we get the requests. Which
Could I ask, since we're done with item 11, could I ask a question that goes back to an earlier item?
just want to make sure we clear with number 11.
Yep, I'll send a PDF,
PDF.
start a fresh email.
We'll get a comment to you, but we still can, if we want to have discussion with staff,
Yes.
line
They're
it.
available.
Yes, okay.
Okay, thank you. Relative to the item number 9 about the parking, what are our thoughts? Is Mr. Freeze still here? Did he? What are our thoughts about, do we have any sense of where we're going to end up with a parking permit system throughout the city? Like Councilor Payne was mentioning, there are parts of the city where it's, every square inch is fought over, and there are other parts, like near where I am, where there's plenty of space.
Yes. So we actually have drafted up a scope of work for that.
Okay.
The idea is even making modifications to our existing parking permit program in those areas where it exists, looking at whether it needs to be expanded to other areas of the city, and creating a process by which it can be expanded as needed.
Okay.
Further than that. So we have a scope of work drafted up and all that stuff. We have literally been waiting for our hiring of a traffic engineer.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Because I think I'll feel better about, how I end up voting on number 9 when it comes back to us, knowing that we do have some, credible plan on its way for managing parking across the city.
Yeah, I've had the conversation with James. I've met with residents in University Circus, a fair amount of residents there that are not students that are really having a lot of issues with parking in that circle. And so there's a scope of work or plan for it once we get staff for that. So this is, we have the now opportunity for public matters. Where is there anyone like to speak on any issues? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move for adjournment.
Second. Okay, can we vote? Thank you all very much. Motion passes. Okay.
Oh, did I? It didn't.
Oh.
Oh, that's.
I thought I did too.
Yeah.
Must not have.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Yeah.